Welcome to the Tech Log, your weekly log entry at the intersection of technology and business. Short episodes, real conversations. Let's get underway. Greenleaf Management is a company that recently looked at their Salesforce bill and they added up how much of the platform they actually used, and they decided to leave. They said they saved about $100,000 a year. That same month, HubSpot told its customers it would start sharing their contact data across other accounts unless users opted out. And that created a lot of backlash. 4 days later, their CEOs decided to scrap that idea and listen to their customers. Two different stories, but both in the CRM space, where the CRM space is feeling some pressure. Pressure in what does a company own versus rent in terms of software and security, and ultimately, is buying a CRM even the right solution? We implement Salesforce here at Port and Starboard, and we have done that for well over 10 years. We love building custom solutions, implementing already built solutions for clients, but we're also building a custom CRM. And ultimately, we always just want to do what is best for our clients and what is the right fit for their needs right now. I'm joined by Lisa and Brittany. Lisa is our CEO, and she plays a huge role in the system architecture that we implement for a lot of our clients. And I'm also here with Brittany, who is our client delivery director, and she cares deeply about our customer success in Salesforce and in any of our solutions that we're implementing for them. She builds solutions that are really creative in both budget and requirements. So thank you both for joining today on this conversation. A few companies have recently went public saying they're leaving Salesforce and HubSpot, or they're cutting their software costs, some 40 to 60, even 80%. That's an interesting shift that we're seeing. Do you think that's just a few companies catching headlines, or do you think there's something happening here in the CRM space?
So I do think it's a few loud companies, but I think there are other businesses that are feeling the pain and the cost of how expensive these CRM systems are. And they're grappling with, being charged for every additional feature or add-on that you want. And, it just feels like the price keeps going up, right? That's how these big software companies continue to make money. But I think a lot of companies feel stuck or beholden to their big CRM because they built their business on it. The cost of switching isn't, something they can afford to do right now. And they don't have a lot of leverage when it comes time to rate increases or renewals because they are, reliant on these products. So, I do think it's a legitimate concern that a lot of businesses are grappling with right now, even if they're not the loud voices, going onto social media and, talking about it or voicing their success in moving off of a big platform. Mm-hmm. It's top of mind for a lot of businesses.
I agree. I think one thing that is kind of fascinating about Salesforce and their product and their business model is they created a CRM that businesses could customize and build onto. But anybody, you could have two companies that are on the same edition and the same features of Salesforce. And one company invested a lot of time and energy into customizing it around their existing business processes. And so it's essentially a custom solution on a managed software as a service platform that they're paying the licenses for. Another company might be using that same edition of Salesforce and paying the same amount of money, but they haven't customized it. They're still using it as a simple CRM. That's an excellent use case to get off of it. If you don't have a lot of customization and you're just using it as a basic CRM system, you're paying a lot of money for a very basic CRM tool if you're only using those features.
Well, that leads perfectly into another question I had for both of you. One of those companies in a recent Salesforce Ben article had said that they thought Salesforce had given them plenty of value, but they were really only ever using a little piece of it. And of course, we see this with a lot of our clients. Especially those that we're doing like an audit or maybe a chart your course type preparation project before we kick off, is that we need to simplify Salesforce for a lot of our clients and customers. They don't need absolutely everything that they're purchasing or licensing. Do you think that's true? Do you think a lot of clients are paying for Salesforce or really any CRM that's an enterprise grade solution and not using all of it or using it to its full capacity?
I think most small and medium companies are not using it to its fullest capacity because that would be overkill. So most of our clients are in what Salesforce would define as SMB, small and medium business, but they're all on Enterprise Edition. They all have a decent amount of customization. They all invested money into projects with partners, with us, or with their own internal staff to customize that solution to their business and tailor it to their business. Therefore, um, doing any sort of feasibility analysis or cost benefit analysis of getting off of it, they would have to take a look at not only what is available in Salesforce, but what are you doing in there now? What are the features you've built for yourself that you're using? Because now you're essentially paying to use features that you yourself built versus what would be the cost to rebuild those things, right? How well is it working for you? And then as far as what Salesforce does have available, are you still planning to grow into it? Are there still Salesforce features that you're paying for now that you're planning to take advantage of in the future? Or, if you're never going to take advantage of those things, then it, maybe you're overpaying for it. It's hard to say because I think because of the way that Salesforce is able to be customized, you really have to look at each unique case on a case by case basis because there could be also you could have licensed managed packages installed in there, so you might be paying extra for that. You could have integrations that are happening between Salesforce and your other business systems. Those could be being managed somewhere. Are you paying humans to manage that? Are you paying for, another solution to manage that? And so, you know, just ripping out your CRM system, unless you're truly just using it as a CRM system, it's not connected in end to anything. And that may be a much more complicated discussion.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the clients we work with, because they are smaller businesses, they start out with one Salesforce use case. And so they may have really built out one area that helps them with a certain business process. But there might be some other out of the box functionality that they're not tapping into yet before they even need to start thinking about paying for like add-on features. So one client that comes to my mind is a manufacturing company that we've been working with. There's a real opportunity for them to expand their Salesforce footprint without buying anything else. So right now they're using it to gather initial profiles on potential businesses that could either use or sell their products, and they're also using it for change management. So internally, when they need to request like an ingredient change or a composition change for one of the products that they're selling. And what's interesting is the sales team is kicking off both of those processes in Salesforce. But what they're not using Salesforce for is what you would think of as all those typical sales functions. So, leads, qualifying those, converting them into opportunities, managing quoting. They're not doing any of that in Salesforce right now. And, those are perfect examples of clients that we love to work with, not to make this a plug for Port and Starboard, but it's true. We see this all the time, and it does make sense, right? Like, you just bought this expensive software and you're focused on adoption and getting everybody on it and just starting to use it. And then, unless you're the internal admin dedicated to, maintaining and servicing Salesforce, you're taking a deep breath and like, okay, great. Now I can go back to my actual job because it's not Salesforce. But then you're leaving a lot on the table because there's other areas of Salesforce that your team could probably benefit from using. Not all of them make sense to set up right away, but I feel like as a team levels up on adoption and comfortability with the system, that's where there's a real opportunity to expand your usage. Just using, standard out of the box functionality. So one of the things that we do for a lot of clients is offer a retainer type service. So a client gets a set number of hours each month, and we spend some of that time maintaining their org, also maintaining their roadmap of new features and enhancements that they want to build out. And we meet with them, we prioritize what to build next, we answer questions. But while we're building out the new and exciting things, we're also giving them the peace of mind that someone's got an eye on things. Things aren't going to slip through the cracks. There's been a lot of security related changes and enhancements lately, and some of those require some real technical understanding of Salesforce. They're not all the most straightforward or easy to understand exactly what you need to do. So I do think, there's a a real benefit of having a technical resource that understands Salesforce to, not only help keep your business running, but make sure you're getting the most out of, what you're paying for, because it's not cheap. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you're right. It isn't cheap. And I think Lisa was making a really important distinction is that Salesforce and HubSpot, I think, could probably be included in this right now. They're no longer just CRMs. There is so much more to these solutions. And like you said, Brittany, with this manufacturing company that we work with, they're not even using the bread and butter CRM functionalities. We actually see that quite often. Clients not using leads or opportunities at all, which is kind of like key functionality of the sales process, which is what Salesforce is good at. And so that's a really interesting, I think, distinction to keep in mind, that these are not just CRMs. And so also, if you're going to build something and use an AI accelerated process to build something, or quote unquote vibe code, you might see some people use that term. You're not just building a CRM. It's not just taking a spreadsheet and automating it. There's a lot more functionality that you would be replacing there. I also want to mention that being an SMB doesn't mean you don't need customization or have a complicated process, right? We have quite a few clients that have under 20 employees, but their process is quite complicated, and they have to have customizations that we have built in their Salesforce to capture that entire business process and to make sure things aren't falling through the cracks. And those things would be very difficult to replace. We also, on the flip side of that, have some customers who are only using base functionality, and it would be quite easy to replace that structure anywhere else. But that scale is an important piece to consider. And I think, especially when we're walking through a build versus buy decision with a potential client, it's so crucial to ask, where are you going to be in 3 or 5 years, right? Do you see your team double or tripling in size? Do you see adding new verticals or processes that are going to complicate this? Do you want to bring this piece of technology in-house? Or are you going to be integrating with a complicated system like an Epic, right? You need to start asking those questions, because that's really going to help that build versus buy as well. And I want to talk a little bit about that build versus buy decision, because we help a lot of people walk through that process. But we have this new piece, right, of AI accelerated development, and how quickly and at a better price point can you build something, or at least build a phase one of a CRM type product. Lisa, what are your thoughts about taking a client through a build versus buy process right now, especially with the environment and the new tools that we have?
Yeah. I mean, this is not a new decision that companies need to make, because we've been looking at the Salesforce platform and saying build versus buy on your customization. Do you want to build your customization on Salesforce, or do you want to buy a managed package solution, right? For something like, let's say, quoting, or for accounting, or for insurance management, whatever it is, there's lots of ready-made packages out there that you can license. So, we've been talking about HubSpot and Salesforce. I think the interesting thing about Salesforce is Salesforce has marketed itself as a CRM, but also has marketed itself as a platform. And as Salesforce makes this pivot to this agent force kind of, I can't really tell, are they rebranding? Are they just launching this as a feature? I'm not really sure. But as they're making this like pivot towards this agent force, we're a platform, headless 360, all these keywords that are flying around right now, we'll see if they stick around. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. They're very good at like experimenting with throwing words up against the wall and seeing which ones stick. Um, you know, the one thing that they definitely have going for them is they're a platform. So depending on who's looking at build versus buy, um, what are your uptime requirements? What are your compliance requirements? What are your security requirements? Who's going to be your sysadmin? How many licenses do you need? How many people are going to be logging in? What are you planning on building? When are you planning on building it, right? You go through this whole road mapping exercise of where do you need to be now? Where do you need to be in a year? Where do you need to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And depending how big and established your company is now and what you're already using, right? I mean, Salesforce gives you a ready built data model. You have all these things. Great. If you're going to build it yourself, well, what are you going to build? Are you just building a CRM? You could probably build a CRM in one prompt right now. Just the way that, before I had access to Salesforce, I could have built myself a CRM and Smartsheet or a Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet, right? I mean, before there was vibe coding, I built my own CRM and Smartsheet. So, this whole concept of we don't need to pay for a CRM is not new, because there were plenty of companies that were not paying for a CRM. In the grand scheme of things, and within a small business, a CRM is a pretty low stakes business software when it comes to uptime and security and all these things for a lot of companies, because if all you're storing in there really is your customer relationship pre-sales data, the worst thing that happens if it goes down is you forget to follow up with your lead, right? And that's really important, but in the grand scheme of things, it's usually not the key of, like, is my business going to stop running today? Am I going to lose a whole bunch of revenue because I can't fulfill my orders, or I can't, get my orders to the warehouse, or I can't, right? Like, in a small starting up company. In a bigger company where now you've got this software embedded in your entire business process, and you're trying to decide, well, where do I go from here? What am I going to build? What am I going to buy? How am I going to adapt to changing technology? There is no one size fits all, right? There's many, many different ways to do many different things. And what's important is to prioritize what's important. What's your overall budget? What's your ROI? What are your goals? What is the talent that you have access to? Because you still need software engineers, you still need developers, you still need business analysts, right? If you're talking about building software, you still need a technology savvy person or persons to be designing that for you, whether they're designing it on Salesforce or designing it with AI. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of challenges coming up next. Is you have, maybe not business process experts and not tech savvy individuals taking it upon themselves to design business software. Um, Salesforce gave a lot of people that were not software developers the ability to develop software. And what happened was, is a lot of people created a lot of things that kind of didn't really work. And then people would have to come to find people like us to fix it. Gave people the ability to migrate data that didn't know what they were doing. And then people end up with a lot of corrupted data. So, like I've been saying all along on this podcast, none of these are new concepts. It's just happening faster and more. And so now you have this concept of, you have people who aren't data experts using AI to analyze data. People who are using AI to develop software, they're not software developers. They don't know the first thing about a data model. They don't understand authentication. They don't understand, data persistence. They don't understand, different types of ways you could delete things from a database and what happens.
Who do you think this will change for? So say, right, you're an SMB, and let's say you're even on the smaller end. 50 employees, maybe a couple million in revenue, right? That's a pretty average person we work with. And they do not have a CRM, or at that very small scale, they're looking in this build versus buy decision. Do you think it's going to affect them with some of these onset tools that can speed up and cheapen the development process? Or do you not really think we're at the point where it's affecting those decisions really right now?
If you have a company of 50 people with a couple million in sales, I would argue that somewhere in your company, you already have a CRM. It might be a spreadsheet. It might be multiple spreadsheets. It might be multiple different people's business processes, right? So the first thing I would do is go in there and find that. What is that? What is that sales process that's happening? If it's a cookie cutter sales process that could just fit into any CRM, depending on who you have available for you on your team, I think you could either build one. I think you could go find one and buy it. I believe in prototyping. So, there's been a number of situations where I've said, why don't you prototype a CRM, right? Why don't you do a phase one of a Salesforce implementation with 5 people, or with, right? Like, don't license the entire thing up front. Um, y- so again, I think it depends. I think it depends on the company and what the process is. I think, a small company, then the less employees you have, the easier it becomes to just go buy something because it's cheaper. The key thing that sticks out to me about the example you just gave is, if there's 50 people, and then depending on how many people you have to license on that, that could be a pretty significant investment in something like a Salesforce, if all you're looking for is something to run like a pretty simple sales process. If it's a very complex Salesforce and sales process, and you only need like 10 licenses, then I'd say maybe that becomes a no-brainer. Yeah, go get Salesforce. It's going to be easier to implement, right? I think you're going to have a trade-off between the implementation, the ongoing license, and the ongoing maintenance of what that looks
Mhm.
like. If it's a complicated sales process, a few licenses, and you're not planning on changing it very much over the next couple of years, Salesforce probably becomes an easy decision because you invest the money up front and then it's just there, it's reliable, you don't need a lot of maintenance. Or if you're planning on growing a lot of other business processes onto it, then I'd say let's go do some discovery around what those are and what the compliance or what the underlying platform requirements are for that to see if is Salesforce the right fit there. Because I'm also not saying that Salesforce is never the right fit. I think Salesforce is the right fit for a lot of different companies and a lot of situations as an enterprise platform to go build on. It's still the best one out there, in my opinion. Um, but that doesn't mean that there's not a place for smaller custom in-house solutions or smaller up and coming CRM solutions. I think you're going to find like the first CRM a small business buys, that market to me is what's going to become very fragmented now because a lot of small businesses, a lot of small development shops or solopreneurs are going to be able to go build pretty reliable and pretty cool CRM solutions.
I agree. Brittany, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about cost of maintenance and just maybe the structure and the resource of time as well, because you manage our team that does the majority of maintenance for our clients, and you're also then navigating license costs and add-ons and packages with these clients and helping them through those decisions. It's no question that these tools are getting more expensive as well. And then if anyone wants Agentforce in their Salesforce, right, that's quite expensive. We even, not as a CRM, but Teams just released their AI pricing, similar to like the Claude, and it's quite astronomical, right? So these small businesses are already struggling to absorb these costs. Do you think this AI accelerated development or maybe even building some on your own is going to be a factor simply because the maintenance cost of maintaining a Salesforce org as an SMB?
Potentially. I mean, there are pros and cons on either side, really, right? I mean, my first thought would be where does the complexity come from? Is the complexity in your business process or your existing software? If the complexity is in your business, the processes, the team dynamics, compliance, data, I mean, that's not going away if you build your CRM yourself. But now you're managing all of that complexity on your own. If the complexity is coming from the software, unused features, add-ons that maybe you purchased and they're not being fully used, then I think that's more of a fit or like governance type problem. And I think that's where it's worth doing like a system audit and a process audit before you start deciding rebuild or renew. And a good litmus test might just be, can you list from memory everything that's actually like connected to, because that's another piece, all these integrations that you might have tied into your CRM today. So can you list everything that's actually connected to or running within your CRM today? And if you can't list all of that out, then you can't make that rip and replace or renew decision yet. You've got to go back and do some internal auditing. And, you know, for a client that's put like years and money into their CRM, it's most often better to make the thing you already have work harder or work smarter than to start over.
Yeah, you don't want to fall victim to, oh, somebody else built their CRM on Lovable and spent 3 days doing it, and now they don't have a Salesforce license, yearly cost. But that's not the reality.
But with AI accelerated development, I mean, you can do a lot. You can do a lot in Salesforce. I mean, you can, instead of another like add-on subscription, maybe you build a Lightning Web component. Maybe that is something that you can do working with Claude as a, technical business analyst or, knowledge worker. I mean, it depends on your skill level, right? But not everything requires a full Salesforce backend developer to do.
So we've talked a lot about people who do have complexity and they have invested money in their Salesforce. the small, mid-sized business owner who maybe is using Salesforce or HubSpot, but they don't have a lot of complexity. They don't have a complex business process. They are paying for expensive software. They do want to try or explore building their own CRM. What are you telling them? What are you sharing with them as they start that process?
I mean, I think if that is your dream, you really, really, really want to go build your own CRM, have at it. I mean, if you're building a CRM on Replit, Lovable, Versal, any of these like AI development where they're hosting it, I would consider that to be a prototype, and I would be really careful about the type of information you're putting into that. I think there's some real uptime and security challenges there that if that's the tool you're using, because you don't know how to use anything more advanced than that, then I think consider the fact that you are building an MVP, you're building a prototype. You're not really, in my opinion, a lot of people would argue with me on this, right? And think that they're building production ready solutions on Replit that are hosted on Replit. And I personally, from in my opinion, I disagree with that. That to me is not, that's a prototype, right? If you came to me with that and you showed that to me, I might think it's really cool, but I think it's a really cool prototype that needs to grow up a little bit before it has a real business use case. If you want to prototype it on Replit and then bring it to somebody that can actually build it for you and figure out where's the best place to host it and who's going to maintain it and this and that, great. If you need multiple people to access it, right? You need something that has some legitimate user provisioning and login, credentials and password rules and compliance. If you're trying to start a company and you don't want to become a software developer, kind of like when I started my company, I did not want to become a bookkeeper. I would still say you need to go buy one. I just don't know if you need to go buy the Ferrari of CRM systems, right? You could buy a bicycle if you don't need to go too far. You could buy, go buy something inexpensive that meets your needs. And if you want to build a prototype to try it out, to figure out what you need to meet your needs, great. But I'd be really careful thinking that you're going to be running your business on a lovable hosted CRM unless you're, maybe you're not doing very much. To me, that's the equivalent of doing it in a spreadsheet many, many years ago. The difference is like the spreadsheet's on Google Drive or the spreadsheet's on your laptop. It's not sitting on somebody else's server. So I think, in my opinion, a spreadsheet is still more secure than doing it on Lovable or Replit.
Well, and there's compliance considerations and security regulations that that business decision makers need to keep in mind as they're making these decisions. Salesforce has, probably the best of the best security infrastructure out there right now. So whether you're small or thousands and thousands of people strong, they have the strongest infrastructure that a CRM needs to have for security and compliance, whether you're also operating globally or just here in the States. And so those are those type of things that you'll have to take into consideration if you're going to decide to go build. And you're definitely not taking those things into consideration if you're moving that into Replit or Lovable. Even in our privacy episode, we discussed how easy that was to work around that, infrastructure to find some email lists without even trying. And so definitely a consideration that if you're not techie, you may not even really think about that, but it could have some real implications for your users.
Right. And remember, it's not the size of your business or the complexity of your business process that determines what your compliance requirements are. It depends on who your customer is. If you're selling to the federal government, well, you better be really careful about what you're storing about the people that you're selling to. If you're in financial services, if you collect a social security number from somebody and type it into a system, or you're collecting information, if all you're collecting is somebody's name and their email address and their business phone number, fine. The minute you start collecting people's, birthdays, social security numbers, home addresses, that is PII, and there are rules. And in different industries, you're going to have different rules about how you're storing that information. And if you're like, oh, I really want to build a CRM system, that's probably not the first thought that's popping into your mind. I think that's where there's propensity to get in trouble. I've built things on Replit, you don't use it for 3 days and then it's like not running anymore. It just doesn't work. And it's like, if you want to be able to use it and use it reliably, I don't know that that's like a sustainable, scalable, do anything. Now, I haven't used Replit now in 6 months, so who knows? Maybe it's better now.
Well, I think the answer there is if you're an SMB wanting to build your own, the answer is not Replit. You can prototype, you can MVP in there, but you're still going to have to go find a developer in-house, someone like us, where you have to find someone or something that can take that to the next level.
Yeah. Like, where are you going to deploy it to? Where are you going to host it? How are people going to access it? Does it need a mobile app? Because then you have a whole new thing you got to build.
Yeah. So the end goal, I don't think for any SMB should be Replit or Lovable or any kind of, cloud-based click around prompt, AI machine that's not where you need to be putting your data or using your system.
These people that are going on LinkedIn and they're like, I built my own CRM on Replit instead of on Salesforce. And they like post about it on LinkedIn. I'm like, cool, I'm just adding this to the list of people that I would never actually work with. Sorry.
Yeah, no, because they're completely almost blindsided to the numerous risks involved with that. And then the numerous risks you're opening up to anyone's data that is in that system. So let me ask this as kind of a last question. This may not particularly change the build versus buy decision, but it may change what you are buying as an SMB. So you might still know you need to buy a CRM, but it may not be Salesforce or HubSpot. And I know we're kind of picking on Salesforce, but it's gotten quite expensive, and I don't think anyone can hide from that fact. But like you were sharing, Lisa, there are a lot of CRMs, and I think there's going to become a lot more CRMs that are maybe industry specific, much smaller, simpler, maybe not entire platform type solutions. Do you think that is really going to change? Is maybe not the build versus buy decision, but the what to buy decision is going to change with the new landscape of technology?
Well, yeah. And just to be clear, like, I don't want us to feel like we're picking on Salesforce because they're expensive. I mean, luxury yachts and like Gilded Age mansions are expensive. That doesn't mean that we don't enjoy them or want to buy them someday, I think price is always a consideration, has always been a consideration. I think the build from scratch option, which remember, like 20, 30 years ago, that was a lot of people's only option. So we went through this whole shift in business technology where everybody moved from proprietary homegrown solutions to cloud-based solutions. And the reason why was because, these cloud-based solutions were coming up and coming. A lot of the software developers were aging out of the workforce. There was nobody to replace them, right? The homegrown solutions were too reliant on physical on-premise servers or, aging talent or, expensive human beings. Software development became like a very high, right? Like there was a number of reasons why you would justify moving from proprietary custom developed solutions to moving on to a platform like Salesforce. Now what you're seeing is the opposite of that. Now you have everybody on these platforms that have become big and cumbersome and expensive. And again, that doesn't mean they're bad because they're expensive. It just means they're expensive. Custom development is more accessible to people that don't necessarily have this like um you don't need to be a software developer for 10 years now to be able to develop code to build the systems that you want. And so I think it's made the ability to design and build systems more accessible to tech savvy business users or business savvy software engineers. You've taken away the need to really have massive teams of people to build a quality software solution. Some people would say that's bad because it's going to take jobs away. I think what it's going to do is just going to democratize software development and make it so that there are a lot more solutions available. And in the end, maybe that means that you can procure solutions that work really, really well for the people that you do have. And people have solutions that they like to work in and like to work on. It's not like software getting shoved down everybody's throat because it's expensive and you have to use it.
Might give some leverage back to the customers too, like the businesses that need the CRM software. Now they don't feel like backed into a corner that they have to have this expensive CRM system that they're only using a sliver of. Maybe now they have like 3 different options and they can, go back and forth and do a little negotiating and say, well, this competitor is offering me this. Can you, match their price?
I feel like we've heard the last of clicks, not code, though.
Yes. I would agree with that.
Never a bad thing for a little more competition, right?
So I would say if you're listening to this and you're an SMB, something if you need to consider between buying versus custom building, or maybe buying something different than what you already have, is sit down for a little bit with your business processes, understand your pricing, look at your terms, pull up that license sheet that you may only look at once a year, and jot it all down and consider, of kind of a full picture of what might make sense for your company. And I think Brittany highlighted a wonderful point to think through. Is your software complicated, or is your business process complicated? Because that can really help you navigate that decision as well. We walk clients through these decision processes all the time. So if you already have Salesforce, you're looking at buying Salesforce or doing something in the midst of what we talked about today, we're more than happy to help walk through that process. We do it all the time, and we really love to make sure that our clients are making the best decision they can, because these are expensive decisions and it affects typically almost everyone at your company, and depends on how happy they are when they log in the morning. I'm sure you want happy people. So if you're in the midst of this decision, slow down. There's no deadline. Take a time, look at your business processes, and understand if build versus buy is the best decision for you and your CRM.
We love to talk technology and business. Learn more about Port and Starboard or connect with us in the show notes. Fair winds until next time.